I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends. Welcome back to Ohio Politics Explained. Today, we'll discuss how Trump tariffs are affecting Ohio pensions, a new documentary about the House Bill 6 scandal, a court ruling on Ohio's social media law, and why lawmakers don't want coroners to be elected. Joining me today is Laura Bischoff.
Hi, Haley.
Hello. Let's start with pensions. Over the past week, President Donald Trump imposed major tariffs on China, more tariffs on U.S. allies, and then paused some of those tariffs. The stock market is not a fan of all this uncertainty, and that has affected all of Ohio's pension systems. Laura, start by reminding us what public pension systems we have and how many Ohioans rely on them.
So we have 5 public pension systems that cover teachers, cops, firefighters, and just about every other government worker. There's about 1.2 million people who are either retirees or currently government workers in those systems. There's a whole other tranche of people who used to be in government work but have left public service. So it covers a lot of people. And collectively, the 5 pension systems have, at the end of last year, they had like $253 billion.
Wow.
It's a lot of money.
That is. So how much have they lost over these past few weeks and months as we've seen some of this market volatility?
To be honest, it changes like by the hour, by the day. I tried to get all of the systems to tell me what was their investment portfolio worth as of April 11th. Some complied with that request. Others gave me other dates, etc. So from near as we could tell, they're down about $4 billion, which is, again, out of $253 billion, it's not a huge loss. But keep in mind that the pension systems, they count on making a return on investment every year, averaging 6.9 to, I think, 7.5%. And if they miss that calculation or that return, it makes it harder to make it up in subsequent years.
Yeah. Did any of the pension folks say what they feel like Ohioans who have pensions can expect over these next few months, or is it just a lot of unpredictability?
Well, it's interesting. I was listening to the state teachers retirement system board meeting this week, and in a discussion at their investment committee, they were just talking about how bouncy the market is, how volatile it is, and that it really is difficult to tell what's going to happen in the future for sure.
Yeah, my 401k has been on a fun roller coaster the past couple weeks.
Exactly.
Our second topic is a new documentary that tells the story of House Bill 6 and what it says about dark money and politics. Filmmaker Alex Gibney put together a 2-part series called The Dark Money Game, which aired on Max this week. The first episode, Ohio Confidential, outlines how former House Speaker Larry Householder bailed out First Energy in exchange for money and political power. Laura, you're in the documentary. How did they approach such a complex saga?
Well, I have to say I have an appreciation for what it takes to really pull together all these different elements and tell a compelling story, and a complex one at that. And I think that they did a good job of, again, pulling together like decades of Ohio political history and these characters and getting all the visuals to go along with it. I got interviewed by Alex Gibney, the documentary filmmaker, almost 2 years ago for this. So they've been working on it for a long time.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how they lay this out for a national audience. I think a lot of us in Ohio have been surprised over the years that the story didn't take off nationally in maybe the way that we thought it should, and maybe we're biased because it's, close to our hearts in Ohio. But because of that, I think it's interesting to see it go before a national audience finally.
Yeah, during the the Larry Householder and Matt Borges trial in U.S. District Court in 2023, there was some national press on that. The New York Times sent a magazine writer. The Wall Street Journal was there. It did get some national press, but yeah, it didn't really take off like wildfire.
One of the criticisms I've heard of the documentary, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, is that it tries to create really neat partisan lines where there maybe weren't. I think I've seen Republicans say there were Republicans who opposed what Householder was doing. There are Democrats who helped him get elected to power. And the impression that I'm getting as someone who has not watched it yet is that they try to make kind of a neat division between Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, Gibney and his team did not get into the weeds of that, of like which faction supported Larry Householder and which Republican faction did not, and the rest of it. I was kind of surprised it didn't say that David DeVillers, was a Trump appointee as a U.S. attorney for the Southern District, and he was interviewed extensively in the piece, and he's the one who, he brought the charges. I also have to say, like, DeVillers brought the charges, and then Vipal Patel, who was the interim U.S. attorney, he brought the deferred prosecution agreement that First Energy agreed to a year later, and then it was Ken Parker, a Biden appointee, who actually brought the case to trial.
Which I think just goes to show how long it took for Householder and Borges to be brought to trial and convicted for their role in this.
It also shows how it transcends partisan lines.
Yeah, for sure. Our third topic is a state law that limits teen social media use, or at least it tried to. A law that was supposed to take effect last year would have required social media companies to get parental consent for kids under 16 who want to use their platforms. But a federal judge permanently blocked it this week. What's the argument here?
So, Judge Marbley said that the law is unconstitutional under the First Amendment and due process, and it just was too broad of an approach. It's interesting because there's other legislation being introduced that would require parental consent for kids under 16 whenever the minor tries to download an app. So it would be the verification and the approval from the parent would come at the App Store level. And that's like a new approach, to kind of get around with this. Because there have been other rulings against these kinds of parent approval for use of social media platform laws.
And the sponsors of this new bill think that this is enough to get around the legal concerns, right?
Yeah, I'm sure they recognize that they're up against big tech on this, and there maybe get some pushback on it as well.
We're going to wrap up today on a really high note: coroners. The current version of the state's proposed budget would make county coroners an appointed position instead of elected. In case you don't often think about coroners, they're the ones that investigate deaths, conduct autopsies, and sign death certificates. This is an interesting one to me because I'm not sure many people think about whether their coroners should be elected.
Well, the coroners say that they should be elected because it gives them a measure of independence, and they're not then beholden to the appointing authority, and that takes some politics out of it. They say that, sometimes there's pressure applied to change the rulings on deaths or maybe outcomes from crime labs, etc. The County Commissioners Association, though, they've been pushing for this. They think that there's already kind of a regional approach to autopsies because it's so hard to get forensic pathologists. There's a nationwide shortage, and they're the ones who do the autopsies of the death investigations. And so the county commissioners also note that like 10 counties had no candidate for coroner in the last cycle.
Oh, wow.
So, it's hard to get people to do this work, and they want to be able to maybe regionalize it a little bit more.
Is it a partisan position?
I think they do run as partisan, although Brian Stewart, House Finance Committee chairman, who I think is backing this, he said, we don't do Democrat or Republican autopsies. We just do an autopsy.
Yeah, that's true. And one more thing before you go. Tune in for a special episode of OPE next week featuring Lieutenant Governor Jim Tressel. We talk to him about his new job and what the future may hold for his political career.